we'll start with you, Susan. I mean, you and everyone's very esteemed on this panel, but you are the CEO of AB Communications, which, you know, is currently going through another licensing phase. New stations are going to come up. As a woman in media, you have, from my perspective, reached the pinnacle of the trade. Would you agree with that or not?
I would say no. I would say definitely not. Probably because I'm coming from a media house that's very young. AB Communications, when you're talking about, when you give examples of 200-year-old institution, I would say for AB Communications we are a baby. AB is 20 years old, so I would say in terms of where we are as an industry, we are still very young. As a nation, we are still very young. 35 years is not old. For black people, also very young. And also in terms of media development, when we look at what has been happening around us in terms of the region, when you look at what has happened in the sector that I'm in, which is broadcasting, quite a lot of the countries around us, even some that are young democratically, they've done so much in terms of broadcasting growth. So I'd say we are barely starting. Yes, I may hold a title that sounds like I've reached the pinnacle, but in terms of the development of the industry itself, we are really learning and we are really very young. So there's so much that we really need to do.
Do you feel that your rise to the position that you have taken up, and you've been in media for a very long time, I would say, not a very long time, but you've been in media for some time. Do you think that that is a positive marker of what's going to happen in the media for women in the future? Or is it, just one woman out of many hundreds who has made it, and the next person to come along might be like with the Guardian example, maybe 200 years from now?
I would say, I think sometimes when we look at our industry, because we don't often talk about our developments and we don't often talk about ourselves as women, I really think when we look at the history of women in media, we've had women before my time. By the way, it's okay, Tendai, 20 years is nothing. We both know that. So yes, I've been in the industry for a long time, around about the same time as Tendai, the 20 years. But when you look at people like Mavis Moe, there are a lot of women that have done amazing stuff. Your Jane Isaus and all those women like Musikumalo, Busi, those women, when you look at the roles that they had when they were at ZBC, those were high-level positions. So sometimes we forget to celebrate those women who really reached a high level in terms of media management, in terms of broadcast management. So sometimes we tend to forget about those women and then look at ourselves as having reached certain levels. Sometimes, I think what I do as CEO of AB Communications is exactly what those women were doing at that particular time. And also you have to look at a situation where you had one broadcaster with so many, radio stations, TV stations. Women, we've had 2 television stations under ZBC for a long time. So I would say we do have women that we need to constantly refer to. Because for me, they are my role models. Women like Christina Charuvinga. Christina Charuvinga had a higher role than me when I was at ZBC. She was the first ever female editor-in-chief. Sometimes we forget to celebrate that. But we are talking about 2001. We have women like pre-scouted. Perhaps the questions then are, where are these women? I mean, why are they no longer in the industry? But these are women that have held very high positions within the media sector.
My follow-up, and you preempted it in a way, is where are these women? But also, where is this documented? I mean, is it as easily accessible to find out this history of women in the media, or is it something more like, because a lot of the times what you find is someone knows this information, but is it documented somewhere? Can we find it? Can we research it? Can we also learn from it? So is that history being documented, do you feel?
Well, I suppose I'm now speaking with my academic side. I think for me, this information is there, it is documented. In terms of whether it is information that's all together, that's something else. But when you go into the history of ZBC, you find this information. When you go into the history of ANZ, you find these women that started this. You go to Newsday, you go to Zifm papers, the history is there. Perhaps in terms of pulling this together as we move along, perhaps that's what's not there. One assumes that some of us are documenting it and we are putting it together. I'm definitely doing that because, you know, I don't want to forget and be forgotten. So it's important to document these things. In terms of where are these women, I suppose different places. People choose to grow in different directions in terms of career choices. If you look at where Wayne Sabayana is, I think she's in a good place. You know, it's a bigger institution. She's serving the whole of Africa, so that's a good thing. Others chose to join their families in the UK, keep the family unit. If we are talking about Christina Charulinga, I think that's what she opted for. Others opted to join the corporate sector for various reasons. So I think in our different ways, we still continue to serve our nation. But I think there are deeper questions that need to be asked. I haven't left the sector, so that question can be put to me. I can only assume that some of the reasons could have had to do with probably not being in the sector, but others could have been about, you know, finding new spaces to grow.
Following from that, you know, there's a discussion around glass ceilings. So people say there's a glass ceiling that a woman can reach in leadership, and after that point, it's only down. Do you feel that there is such a glass ceiling, or is it self-imposed? Is it something maybe women have a barrier inside themselves, or is the barrier more in the context and the environment that we're operating in?
I think the issue of glass ceilings pertains to anybody and everyone, male or female. I suppose it's a mindset. There are so many ways you can grow. You don't always have to grow vertically, you can grow horizontally. So I think it's a matter of your own mindset to say, at what point do I believe I've reached a glass ceiling? I think in certain fields you can decide as an individual that when I reach this point, it will be enough for me in this particular sector. And after that, I want to move to different things. I actually feel like that. There's a point I know when I've done this, I want to leave it and do something else. I want to talk about what I'm going to do, but I know I have a passion for other things besides what I'm doing right now. So I know when I reach a particular point, I would want to move from what I'm doing currently to do something different where I believe I could also make a huge difference. So I think the advantage, I suppose, with certain positions is that sometimes you have a contract that's 5 years and then maybe it's renewed for another 5 years. Surely when it's going to be renewed for another one, and then you run into issues and problems where you feel, but honestly, what new ideas am I coming up with? So some of it you must introspect and say, am I still able to come up with new ideas so that I keep on doing what I'm doing and I keep this position? So I think that is critical for everyone, whether male or female, because you really have to give your best. And sometimes there are certain fields where you can run out of bright ideas. And when you run out of bright ideas, people will notice. And when people notice that you are not offering anything new, you are obviously in a space where you are under pressure to either come up with something new or move. And I think that should really be what should happen. Otherwise, you then have these situations where you are being told, oh, this person must go. Obviously, I wouldn't want to be told you must leave. I want to leave before people start saying, oh, she must leave because she's not offering anything new.
So that context of not offering anything new professionally, when we balance it as women and we say, okay, let's say I'm Jane, I have 2 children, 5 and 3 years old. I have to take care of the children's needs. I have to cook and clean and all that after work. So maybe my male colleagues can stay in the office until 10, 11 p.m. working, but I have to be out by 6 and start working on the domestic chores. So can we always balance it up and say, it's all in a professional realm? Or is there also those social aspects of being a woman that can impede progress in a career?
I think the issue of balance is always a tricky one. I think we talk about it as in a theoretical context, but practically it doesn't work. I think it's about choices. It's more about choices than balance. Because how do you balance, a job and a child and a person? And things don't always work perfectly. Your child is in perfect health. Your child is, choosing to have the consultation times when you are not in a board meeting. So you have to make the choices, painful choices sometimes, to say, okay, I have a board meeting that's happening the same time as my child's consultation, and last time I missed the other one because I was abroad or whatever. So it's about choices and knowing that you will be in a position like that. And it's about finding a way of having the necessary support structures, so that at the end of the day, when you are in that board meeting, who is filling in for you when you need, when your child needs to see that you care? It's your child's first soccer match or hockey match, and it's a Saturday, and they're thinking, well, surely it's a Saturday, mommy must be attending. By the way, I also believe that men have the same challenge. I have a lot of male colleagues. You see them agonizing, but they probably don't agonize loudly the way that we agonize as women. But believe me, the male colleagues agonize about that inability to attend their son's first soccer match. They can't attend their child's prize giving. They will agonize over the same thing. I'm happy there are some male colleagues here. I'm sure they would also feel the pain and the disappointment that I can't be at my child's function. So ultimately, the good thing about children, there's usually a father and a mother. So when the mother can't be there, the father has to be there. After all, when my husband or my partner can't be there, surely I also cover for him. Oh, I'm so sorry your father couldn't come, he was in a meeting. So surely the same thing can happen. My husband should be able to go there and say, I'm so sorry, your mother is in a meeting, she can't come, but I'm here, so it's okay. We will tell her about how well you are doing.
Thank you for your comments for now. I'd like to move on now to Tendai. Do you perhaps have any follow-up from what Susan just talked about? That is there guilt, in that role where you can't necessarily balance between, out of work and in work responsibilities?
Thank you. I think guilt you cannot run away from because we're human. And I think, like Susan rightly said, that it's not that clear-cut where you strike a proper balance between being a mom and your career. But like you also rightly said, that it's about making choices. And for some that are lucky that you have a partner with you that you can share those responsibilities with, I think life becomes a lot simpler. But the guilt, definitely, yeah, that's something I think we will live with, yeah.
You talked about choice and making the choice to get into broadcasting. Some 20 years ago, is it? I don't know.
It's actually not 20. It's a little less than 20.
It's a little less than 20.
You make me feel
okay.
old.
Okay, a few years ago.
Yeah.
When perhaps, you know, I think even now, people who want to get into media still face those challenges from parents to say, but what is media? You know, like, go and be a lawyer or go and be a doctor or something, so to say, that people say. How easy or hard was that for you to convince your family to say, hey, you know, I want to go into broadcast?
I think growing up, I was always very, I don't want to use the word hard-headed, but I think that was it. Once I decide that this is what I want to do, it would be very hard to convince me otherwise. So I remember even after my O-levels, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do radio. But at the time, I think the UZ, which was the only institution of higher learning, didn't have anything in media. And I knew, I'd made up my mind that I didn't want to go to the UZ because there was nothing for me there. I knew what I wanted to do. So I remember too that after O-level, I went for A-level because I had to. Because parents expect you to have this degree in something, but I was absolutely not interested in that. So I always look back now and I think my 2 years of A-level were totally wasted because I didn't want to be there. And I think after that whole thing happened, after A-level happened, and after I did convince them that this is what I wanted to do, they had no choice but to give in. So I knew what I wanted to do, yes.
You're talking about those wasted years, and I think that's a challenge many people have. I've heard people who want to be writers, but first go into law, practice law for 10 years, and then afterwards realize, you know, I'm going in the wrong direction. I actually want to do something else. Those lost years, particularly in a context like Zimbabwe, where jobs are so hard to come by, where you may say, I have a passion for this thing, but this is what's going to pay the bills. The parents are expecting me to start contributing. I'm now an adult. How can we balance that passion to do something and pursue it in a context like Zimbabwe, where already the opportunities are very limited?
I believe this is one of the things that has killed a lot of industries and a lot of jobs and a lot of stuff that's happening here. That whole thing of wanting to do something because that's what's available. Because I think when you choose something that you're passionate about, even when there's storms to weather in that career, in that job, in that industry, I think it's easier to you know, maneuver and stay put. Unlike if you choose something because that's what's available and your heart is not really into it. So I always believe, I don't know if there's anything called balancing there. It's either you're passionate about something or you're not. And I think it's important that you go and you follow what your passion is, what your heart really is, that your heart wants.
Following again from that conversation about the glass ceiling, do you believe there is a limit to which women can succeed in media, or is it something in our mind frame or in our mindset? Is it something in the environment? Can you have it all?
I think Susan said it very well, that it's a mindset, because the sky is definitely the limit. You can go anywhere and you can be anything that you want to be, really, as long as you set your mind to it and you believe that you can be anything that you want to be. I don't think there's any limitation to what you can become, even in media.
Thanks for those comments. For now, I'll move to Thelma. Thelma, who is the political editor of the Daily News. Politics and media are two very hot subjects in Zimbabwe. How do you cope?
Like what the two speakers said, you do cope because you're passionate about what you do. Like for me, for instance, I went into journalism because I've always been passionate about being the voice of those people who cannot voice out their concerns, you know, being the voice of the voiceless. I'm passionate about, you know, defending human rights. So when I look at, you know, the issues that you've spoken about, they don't, when I put them on a scale with my passion with